In Amsterdam, I continued working in advertising and marketing. And I guess the story to Womanship again is about creating this series of connections that happened along the way. It was about 2000 and maybe 14, 15, and I was in Ibiza with 7 of my UK girlfriends, and we had this amazing villa. And I remember we were all kind of, congratulating ourselves at having got to this phase in our life. Not just the fact that we could afford this amazing shit, it was also the things that we'd got through in our lives to get to that point. So it was the marriage breakups, the parents passing away, some people had really sick children, all of these things, and we were sitting there as a group. And it's really interesting, I think as you get older, the conversations that you have change in terms of depth. And we started talking about what was happening in our minds and our bodies in what I now know as perimenopause. And it was like piecing together these bits of thread over the pool. I remember I'd never even heard the word perimenopause back then. There was so much less information about it. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is insane. We are theoretically educated women of the world, and yet we know so little about our minds and our bodies. And not just at this phase in our life, but almost at every phase from our periods onwards, we knew nothing about what was really happening with ourselves. And that thought stayed with me. So cut to lockdown, and work dried up for me and my partner, and I decided to do a deep dive into not just perimenopause, but it quickly spread into other women's taboo areas. And I made my partner do it with me because he's much more, right-brained. I was going to say male, but more right-brained than I am. Let's just be honest. For him to understand what I was going through with perimenopause, he needed to read it and understand it himself rather than me tell him. We ended up having the most amazing discussions about the things that women go through. And it's quite interesting when you have those discussions for the first time with a man, because they're things that we take as standard. Little things like, going to the toilet with a tampon up your sleeve, which every woman just goes, yep, know that feeling. To abortion, to miscarriage, to fertility, to, all these different stages that we have right through to menopause. There were a lot of times he was like, you women are insane. And I'd be like, okay, stop. That's not for you to comment on, really. And then he turned around, and he's a strategist, and then he turned around and said something that I couldn't get out of my head. And he said, I can't believe that given the amount you women talk, you don't talk about the really important stuff. And it kind of blew my mind. It's the type of thing that I've said this to every woman I've spoken to Womanship about. And every woman has nodded and agreed. Almost every woman. I think there was only one woman who I've ever spoken to who said, no, I share absolutely everything. And then she said, but I do understand women have this issue. It's so funny, in advertising, you look for these universal insights, and this is the most universal insight I've ever found. And even though other women were nodding along and saying yes, again, him being more kind of right-brained was, but you need to prove it. And actually, I'm really glad that he did say that. He helped me put together a research piece, which is an ongoing piece. We've had almost 500 women complete it to date. And the responses over the past few years have remained amazingly similar. Basically, women are natural born worriers. Turns out that about 3/4 of us have had a problem or worry that stayed on our mind in the past week, over 40% in the last 24 hours. The list of things that we're worrying about falls into the same 8/9 major buckets. So career and finance, sex and relationships, fertility and pregnancy for a certain group, motherhood and family, emotional well-being, physical well-being, aging and menopause, and grief and loss. And the 9th area, which funny enough is becoming more and more important, is the world around us. So conflict, environment, governments, bigger healthcare systems that we have no control over. And what was really interesting is that only 29% of women feel they can be completely open and honest about any problem or worry they're going through, even with their closest friends. And even less about how they're feeling emotionally. And the reasons are all the same. Patriarchal shame based. So embarrassment, fear of judgment, fear of being the only one, fear of it being used about you, fear of being talked about, fear of burdening or overburdening other people, which makes sense of a lower emotional score. So if I'm feeling really, really down, I don't actually tell my mum or my best friend or my sister how low I'm feeling, because it feels like I'm transferring my worry to them. They're going to start worrying about me. And as women, we've just been taught just to deal with it. And I remember all this just made me think, wow, there are so many great schemes that are set up by corporations and even governments in terms of helping women get equity. But actually, if we don't understand ourselves or the women around us, how can they ever work? Because we're not talking about the things we are often all going through. 3/4 of women feel better just by being able to share what they're going through. We don't need the answers. It's just the act of actually processing it and writing it down or telling somebody else. There's an actual oxytocin change that happens in our brain, and we feel lighter for just being able to do that. It's just an incredible change. And we often share with people that we don't know very well, because it takes away this fear of judgment. So I guess that's where the seeds of womanship really started from. It made me just think about the importance of bringing women together to share and support each other. We're over 51% of the population, and yet we moan about the inequity that's happening. And it doesn't matter what country you're in, maybe in the Netherlands and the UK it's more like this, and in India it's more like this, but we're still facing the same issues of misogyny, having to look after our safety, trying to protect our bodies, lack of research in medical care, the glassing. We're all facing the same issues. My thinking is, when have women ever spoken across man-made borders about the things that bind us together as women? To show that these things are real and they need to be taken into account for society. And also, I think we have the ability to change so much of the world around us by doing that. I mean, how many women are doing drive-by shootings in the US or stabbings in the UK? How many women are in the governments of any two warring fractions? If you sat down two women from any two warring side with their 16-year-old sons and said, right, there's a gun on the table, we may as well kill them now because, they're going to go and get shot or killed anyway, without any male intervention or knowledge of what's going on, do you think you women could sort something out? I honestly think women would try and sort it out. I'm not a mother, but we have a different bond with, I think, children. I think, we'd be less likely to send something that has come from us and we've taken years caring for to die. So I think we've got so much to gain from coming together and supporting each other as women so that we can change the world around us.